On night 2 of the 2024 NFL Draft, the Panthers add another offensive playmaker and a potential successor to Shaq Thompson. We'll break it all down right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where next Friday I'll be back with the weekly Friday mailbag, something I do throughout the offseason, either at me or DM me. But of course, follow me on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for next week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. I am live once again here on YouTube following the second and third round of the 2024 NFL Draft up in Detroit. And it was a busy night, y'all, for the Carolina Panthers. Did not know how active they would be as far as the trades would go, but they were very active. A fun night, in my opinion, watch the Panthers add 2 more players to their squad heading into 2024 and making what I felt like were some pretty shrewd trades by new general manager Dan Morgan, who has had some pretty good moments so far. There's not a lot to criticize about a man I don't think a lot of fans were necessarily that excited about, considering he was a part of the old regime here in Carolina that just had a 2-15 season, that David Tepper was unable to bring in someone from the outside to be the general manager. Now, he did hire Brant Tillis from Kansas City, which I think is a great hire as far as the salary cap and contracts go. And we look at a lot of the structures of the deals done so far this offseason. Brant Tillis, I think, has done a fantastic job with those. And Dan Morgan, working with him, has also done a fantastic job evaluating players, bringing those players in via free agency and setting the Panthers up to where they felt like they could go best player available in the draft heading into last night, where they decided to trade up from 33 to 32 to take Xavier Legette out of South Carolina. Then tonight, where they were all over the board, moving up and down throughout the night. So let me just start at the beginning of the night and work my way back to later on, and we'll start talking about what the Panthers can do tomorrow, and we may even make it to Saturday on this live stream tonight. Don't want to get too long, but this is technically like a special edition. So I kind of have some free reign on how long I can go on the show. I don't want to be up too late. Got to get back to it again tomorrow at noon. And my plan is to be live with y'all sometime later Saturday afternoon to break down the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th round for the Carolina Panthers. But looking at round 2, pick 39. That's where the Panthers are supposed to take a player tonight as they headed into day 2 of the NFL Draft. We talked about this. The options I felt like the Panthers had was either taking a center like a Jackson Powers-Johnson or a Zach Frazier, taking a corner like a TJ Tampa out of Iowa State, Mike Sanders still, a lot of guys that were out there on the board, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Cooper DeJean, guys that we've talked about, or potentially trade back, get more assets, and possibly add another day 2 pick to this year's draft. Well, the Panthers decided the best case for them on Friday night was to trade back from 39 to 52nd overall with the Los Angeles Rams. They were in return. They also got the 5th round pick, 155 overall, and a 2nd round pick in 2025, which is huge. Now, they did all this with Cooper DeJean from Iowa on the board, who eventually was drafted 40th overall by the Eagles. They also watched Kool-Aid McKinstry, who was on the board, get drafted by division rival Saints, 41st overall. Jackson Powers-Johnson, the center out of Oregon, went 44th overall to the Raiders. Edgerrin Cooper, another name at linebacker that I had seen mocked to the Panthers. He was selected 45th overall by the Packers. All 4 of those players Carolina could have taken at 39, but they decided they were going to take the Rams offer, which was a desperate offer, according to Jason from overthecap.com. The Rams gave up 2,334 points to get to 39, which is worth 1,143 points on the trade chart. That equates to giving up the 35th pick in the draft. So a home run trade, in his opinion, for the Carolina Panthers. And the Rams, they did this because there was a run on defensive tackles. Rukaroro from Clemson, Johnny Newton from Illinois, Devondre Sweat from Texas had gone off the board in 3 of the last 4 picks ahead of 39. Los Angeles, who just watched Aaron Donald, quite possibly the best defensive tackle of all time, retire this offseason, needed to find not necessarily a replacement, but another body to put at that position. They go out there and get Braden Fisk from Florida State, previously from Western Michigan, as he transferred to the Noles prior to this past season. So the Panthers benefited from a team that was desperate. And we saw a lot of teams in the second round trading up, trading back, trying to get in position to get their players. As we saw the run on corners, we saw the run on defensive tackles, all happened there in the second round. But the Panthers felt like they were good. They didn't need another defensive tackle. They just signed Derek Brown to a long-term deal. They brought in Ashawn Robinson. They felt, I guess, fine right now at corner. They wanted to move back, get some draft capital, and it's huge, quite honestly, for the Panthers to be able to recoup a second-round pick in 2025. The Rams are a team that did go to the playoffs this past season. Now, the way the NFL is structured, about half the teams from the previous year don't make the playoffs to next year. If Matthew Stafford's healthy, that's likely going to be a playoff team again a season from now. But still, they are able to get a second-round pick, something they lost when they traded up to number 1 last year with Chicago to get Bryce Young. That is good business, to move back from 39, bypassing some players like DeJean, McKinstry, Powers Johnson, who I would have loved to see in black and blue in Carolina, in order to not have that massive gap between 1 and 3 next year in the draft. So in my opinion, just looking at that trade at that point in time, and even right now, I didn't hate it, even though I was like, damn, really would love to get Kool-Aid. I had someone who sent me, because I asked before the draft started, I asked y'all, what do you want to see? Who do you want? Someone sent me the Kool-Aid man busting through the door gif. And I told him I would love for Kool-Aid McKinstry to be in Carolina just so every single Sunday we can tweet that out. Unfortunately, he's going to be a New Orleans Saints, and I wish him, health and happiness, but not on-field success as a team-wise goes for the New Orleans Saints. That's the player that we'd have loved to have here in Carolina. So Dan Morgan, good business, moving from 39, getting 155 in the 5th round and a second-round pick primarily. That's the big thing in next year's draft. So what do the Panthers do from there? They decided, let's trade back up into the second round to draft a running back. Jonathon Brooks out of Texas is really decided to take with the 46th pick in the NFL draft. They traded pick 46 to the Indianapolis Colts. They traded pick 52, rather, for 46 to the Indianapolis Colts. Also gave up pick 142, which is from the Dennis Daley trade to Tennessee a couple years ago. And that pick 155, which they got from the Rams early on in that night. So why a running back is something that a lot of people were asking themselves. I go back to this quote from Dave Canales, Panthers head coach, back in February. He said this: you have to be able to run the ball to go where you want to go. Ultimately, which is number 1, to win the division in the NFC South, and then to win deep in the playoffs. And if you watch teams that go far, it's the teams that can run, because I promise you, the pass rush gets better every week. You advance in the playoffs. So it's something that I'm going to be stubborn about. It's something I'm going to be committed to. And apparently, they're so stubborn, so committed, that they're taking a running back coming off of an ACL tear, suffered late in his season last fall at Texas. Now, don't get me wrong. I love the player Jonathon Brooks. I thought he was outstanding a year ago. And the positive, too, about him playing the running back position, a position where there's so much wear and tear, he only has 238 career carries in 3 collegiate seasons, because he was playing behind Bijan Robinson, who's now with the Atlanta Falcons, and Roschon Johnson, who I believe is a Chicago Bear. Either way, he was behind 2 NFL backs for his first 2 years, did not get an opportunity until this past fall as a redshirt sophomore. In week 2, down in Tuscaloosa, he and the University of Texas announced to the world that they were legitimate contenders for a college football playoff berth, which they ended up getting later on that season. I just go back to that 4th quarter against Bama. And the clock rules, where they no longer stop the clock for a first down throughout the entire game. Texas was able to just sit on the ball, hold it for that 4th quarter, and it was handed off to Jonathon Brooks, and he was gashing them. Offensive line did their job, but Jonathon Brooks was outstanding in that game. And right at that point in time, I was sold on him as an NFL back, and I quite honestly do like the player. Now, the trade, a little surprising that they would go up for a running back when that certainly is not considered a primary need, at least by me. And I think a lot of y'all out there as well did not see running back as something the Panthers needed to get, especially in the second round. Now, if they want to do that in the fifth round, fine. But the second round, I don't know if that's what we wanted to see necessarily. Not saying that it's a bad thing. I just don't think that was a big position of need for this team going into the season. Now, looking at his stats throughout his career at Texas, again, 51 attempts in his first 2 seasons behind Bijan and Roschon there in Texas. Last year, 1,139 yards, 6.1 yards per carry, 10 touchdowns. He had 25 receptions, 286 yards, and a touchdown before his injury. He played in 11 games before having what they describe as a clean ACL tear. Dave Canales mentioned earlier this night that his versatility was a big reason why they wanted to bring him to Carolina, as not just being a good rusher, but a good pass catcher. The Panthers put out a couple of videos on their socials of one-handed catches from Jonathon Brooks, something that I don't think the 2 receivers here right now in Carolina would be very good at doing. I don't think we've really seen Chuba Hubbard or Miles Sanders have that kind of play, at least in their Panthers career so far. So that definitely raises an eyebrow with me, wondering if he comes back healthy and ready for camp, could he push for the number 1 job, considering that the versatility is something that Dave Canales says is extremely important for running backs in his offense. Now, Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network came out immediately, said, following the Panthers' selection of Jonathon Brooks, that his recovery is on track. By the way, he had surgery by the Dallas Cowboys team doctor, which led a lot of people to believe that Dallas would select Jonathon Brooks as their running back. Of course, that did not happen, as Carolina ended up getting him. He's on track and should be ready to go by July 1 and be ready for training camp, which will be at the end of July in Uptown Charlotte. So aside from the ACL tear, not a lot of wear and tear on the body, 238 career carries, and a solid runner when he got the opportunity. Like, he had over 6 yards per carry throughout his career. Averaged it his first 2 years, and of course last year as a primary back at Texas. And while they ended up giving away that 5th round pick, it was worth getting a 2nd round pick by trading back and then trading up. Getting a 2nd round pick in 2025, that is what I'm really focused on. I feel like this also could be bad news for Miles Sanders, who we've discussed. Only reason he was even on the roster up until this point was because it would have cost Panthers over $2 million against salary cap to get rid of him. Now, post June 1, they can save some money. Wouldn't be that big of a deal. And now with Brooks in the fold, you would think that that's a decision the Panthers are going to want to make. I've had people ask me, is there no value for Miles Sanders? Look at the draft tonight. Brooks, first running back off the board, pick 46. The league does not value running backs in the draft. They certainly are not going to value a running back who is 5 years into his career, coming off the worst season of his career. Maybe you can get some roadside boiled peanuts for Miles Sanders, but other than that, I don't know what else to expect. But looking at those 2 trades, and especially the selection for Jonathon Brooks, the 2nd round pick is great. But going back to pick 142, and I tweeted this out at Julian Council on Twitter earlier on Friday evening. Pick 142, that's one of the 5th round picks Carolina sent to Indianapolis to move up to 46. That comes from the Dennis Daley trade from a couple seasons ago. Dennis Daley, a player who the Panthers tried at left tackle. He did not work at left tackle. They tried him at other spots at guard. He didn't work there. Tennessee was desperate when Taylor Lewan went down to get a left tackle. They ended up trading for Dennis Daley, a player the Panthers were going to cut. That trade helped the Panthers, along with the other 5th round pick that they had from that Rams desperate trade. It allowed them to get a playmaker at running back in Jonathon Brooks to help out their 2nd-year quarterback, Bryce Young. So Dennis Daley turned into Jonathon Brooks. That's a positive, folks. It may not be the pick that you would expect at 46, considering that they need another corner. They still have not addressed tight end. Linebacker could have made sense right there. Hell, defensive tackle maybe would have made sense. Instead, they go with somebody who came in for a top 30 visit, and someone who said, Jonathon Brooks brought this up when speaking to the media on Friday, that he loved his visit to Carolina and the fact that they had the best plan for him as far as his recovery goes. And that's very important for a player to feel comfortable and for a team to outline this is our plan for you. This is how we want to go about things, which makes me think that Chuba is still going to be RB1. Last year of his deal, why not give him a lot of runs? But Jonathon Brooks, rather, is going to get a lot of opportunities as well this upcoming season. So I love the player. I think the way that the trades worked out and going even back to a couple years ago to the Daley trade, it makes it a little bit more palatable for fans who may not be a fan of taking a running back in the second round. And y'all know me. Use them, abuse them, lose them. That's how I feel about the running back position. And I apologize to Tariq Cohen's cousin if he's watching the show. I hope your cousin gets an opportunity in Carolina. I really do. Great story. Love them back in Chicago. But the NFL does not value running backs. Now, the Panthers, they say they do, which is something that I'm going to try to just accept. Jonathon Brooks, good player. Hopefully can come back, bounce back, be healthy, but really next year is where the need would be. And that was kind of a theme on Friday night. The Panthers not necessarily addressing needs right now like corner and like tight end, but looking down the road where after this year, Chuba Hubbard probably gone. Think he should be gone. Miles Sanders should be gone after this year. You needed a running back. Why not go out there, get someone who you like? And if you're going to take it slow, considering he's coming off an ACL, maybe not bad to have somewhat of a redshirt year this upcoming season, although I may think that's probably not what people want to hear when it comes to Jonathon Brooks. I like him as a player. Don't really hate the pick because of the player, but certainly curious the Panthers decided that's what they wanted to do. But helping Bryce Young, that was a key to the offseason, and they've done that by getting Xavier Legette from South Carolina and now Jonathon Brooks from Texas. Going to get into the other moves made on Friday night, but in a moment, got to do this first. Got to pay the bills here on the show and thank our sponsors over there at LinkedIn. When you're hiring for a small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board, y'all. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites, and that includes me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'd never go to other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write the job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. In fact, 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, quick swig of water there as no break here on a live show. All right, getting back into it. Day 2 of the NFL draft wrapped up. Panthers trade back, then trade up, get a second-round pick in 2025. That may be the best news of the night, to not have that gap between 1 and 3. Great job by Dan Morgan being able to do that for Carolina. And we're going to get into a trade they made a couple years ago. Actually, let's just get into it now. Revisiting a Brian Burns trade. That's something I feel like we should do when looking at it. I brought up Dennis Daley trade. Pick 142, that helped the Panthers trade back up along with pick 155, which they got from the Rams by trading back from 39 to 52. That helped them get Jonathon Brooks. So Dennis Daley ended up being Jonathon Brooks for the Panthers, an offensive weapon for Bryce Young. Going back to the Brian Burns trade, the Panthers got that extra second-round pick, 39, which, again, they traded back. So they had that second-round pick in 39. They got pick 141 with their fifth-round pick swap, and they have a fifth-rounder next year. But focusing on pick 39 and 141 in this year's draft. Having 2 second-round picks allowed the Panthers to move up from 33 to 32 and feel comfortable knowing that they still had another pick in the second round. This is something that Dan Morgan has brought up, how he likes to have a pick in every single round. So because they had that pick from the trade with his old buddy, Joe Shane, the general manager in New York, that made them feel comfortable enough to move up to 32 from 33. So not only did they move up from 33 to 32, they also used pick 141, which they got in that trade for Brian Burns to New York to move up to get Xavier Legette plus the fifth-year option, which the Panthers clearly valued. We waited to see what happened tonight with Buffalo. Buffalo wanted Keon Coleman, someone who I talked about, I liked, and apparently Josh Allen felt like that was the best receiver left on the board, and they knew they could get him at 33 because Carolina, Brandon Beane, Dan Morgan, former colleagues, Dan worked underneath him, probably knew him from his time back here in Carolina. They, of course, talked to each other. Who do you want here? Do you want the fifth-year option? Do you care about that? Carolina cared more about the fifth-year option, and it seemed Buffalo did, and Josh Allen got the receiver that he wanted there at 33. Buffalo picked up some compensation, and it helped Carolina get the guy that they wanted. But still, having the second-round pick from the Giants trade allowed Carolina to feel comfortable to move up to 32. They also got pick 141 with the pick swap, and that allowed them to get Xavier Legette and the fifth-year option. Then 39, which they got from the Giants in the Burns trade, they moved to 52 and got the second-round pick back for next year from the Bryce Young trade that they traded away last year, moving up to number 1 with Chicago, along with a fifth-rounder to replace the one that they used. That was 141 to get Xavier Legette, which they then used combined with their other fifth-round pick, 142, to get Jonathon Brooks. So in the end, the Brian Burns trade allowed the Panthers to trade up to get Xavier Legette and still feel comfortable about having a second-round pick. It allowed them to then trade back, have the extra fifth-round pick then, to then go back up there, get Jonathon Brooks, and they got a 2025 second-round pick. Pretty good business there. I am still not in love with the idea of Brian Burns not being a Carolina Panther, but if you can flip Burns and then get into the draft and turn Burns into Xavier Legette, a wide receiver, which you desperately needed, Jonathon Brooks, a running back of the future, and get back your 2025 second-round pick next year, that's good business, man. Like, Dan Morgan's kind of cooking here with the way he's been maneuvering the draft board and the way that he's been able to get some friendly trades from guys who are his friends and be able to recoup what he's been able to recoup from the Brian Burns trade. Hated it at the time. Still don't love that he's not here, but it's hard to argue against that trade leading to Xavier Legette, Jonathon Brooks, and a second-round pick next year in 2025. So something to certainly sit back and appreciate from the Panthers general manager, Dan Morgan. They weren't done with the trades. They decided that they're going to trade their first pick in the third round, pick 65 to the Jets for pick 72 and 157. So getting back that fifth-round pick yet again, a common theme for the Panthers. They decided then at 72 to select linebacker out of Kentucky, Trevon Wallace, with their pick. And this goes back to the focus, it seems like, for the Panthers in day 2. Getting players that fill future needs. Not necessarily worrying about this year, but understanding that this is a rebuild. It's going to take time. Why not address future needs next year? They did it with Jonathon Brooks, and they did that with Trevon Wallace out of Kentucky, who, in my mind, is now the front runner to be the successor to Shaq Thompson. They still love Josie Jewell. They still love Shaq, but they understand Shaq contract's up after this season. Unlikely to come back. Josie Jewell, the way it's structured, will be back for a year next year. They needed to increase their depth because it was god-awful, if we're being honest with y'all, with ourselves, when evaluating this team. The linebacker depth was suspect, was not good. Getting someone now in the third round who they believe in, and understand your GM is a former linebacker. We're all aware of that. You would think he would have a pretty good eye. Doesn't mean that he will, because John Elway constantly, when he was in Denver, kept missing on quarterbacks. So just because you play the position does not mean that you're going to do the best job of evaluating the position and putting those guys in position to have success. But in theory, you would think that Dan Morgan knows what he's looking at, especially having really cut his teeth as a scout before getting the roles he had in Seattle, then in Buffalo, then here in Carolina, and now where he's sitting at as the president of football operations and as a GM, as we presently sit here on Friday, April 26th, after night 2 of the 2024 NFL draft. So they needed to find somebody to eventually replace Shaq, and they felt like Trevon Wallace was the pick, and they needed more depth. Now, looking at Pro Football Focus, his grades weren't great last year and throughout his career in Kentucky. To be honest, like, that's just from what they felt like, that what they saw. I looked at his numbers at Pro Football Reference as far as the tackle numbers. They weren't really all that impressive, but he was a starter. PFF, their scouting report for Wallace, they say this: Wallace is a top-tier athlete for the position, but he must improve his anticipation and recognition in order to truly be a difference maker with his physical gifts. Dan Morgan said he's a guy who can run sideline to sideline. We will see when he gets the opportunity. I know one thing, though, when looking at the board, that a lot of fans are going to be thinking about and kind of wishing would have happened. Peyton Wilson from North Carolina State, who we've talked a ton about, was available. He did not go until, I believe, pick 98 to Pittsburgh. It's the fact that he doesn't have, this was reported by Ian Rappaport, he doesn't have an ACL in one of his knees, which is wow. If that is true, that is wow, that if he's able to do what he did the last couple seasons without having like any knee cartilage in one of his knees, like that's insane. And 22 teams shared their medical information. They all got to see what Peyton Wilson's medical report looked like, and all those teams felt like he was a one contract guy. Now, if he's a one contract guy, that sucks for him because he's not going to make any money. But that's great for the teams because they're not paying him a lot of money, and they can move on after his 4 years when he's going to be 28, 29 years old. It may have been a risk. It's something I wanted to see. I think he's a first-round talent. Daniel Jeremiah, when I was watching NFL Network, said this is a guy, he had 41 on his board. This is a guy, had he not had injury issues, would have been long gone. He's a first-round talent who, I don't even know if you can say fell back because the injuries is certainly a concern. The age and thinking he can only play one contract, that would lead you to maybe wait on getting him instead of getting a player who you feel like can stick around for, of course, multiple contracts with your organization. Would have loved to see him, Peyton Wilson. I certainly wish him the best. And, of course, he's going to Pittsburgh. And because it's the Steelers, he's going to be outstanding. May only be outstanding for 4 years. They have had guys like Hines Ward who's had the issues with the knee and played a long career. Maybe Peyton Wilson will prove the doubters wrong, that he is more than just a one contract guy and he becomes another great Steelers linebacker. Would have loved to have him in Carolina. That's not the case. Trevon Wallace, quite honestly, don't know a lot about him. The numbers don't look all that great. The scouting report isn't all that great from people outside the building. They like him. So hopefully it works out. But he's set up right now to be the successor to Shaq Thompson next year here in Carolina. One more ad read, and we'll get into what the Panthers should be looking to do tomorrow when we look at rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7 in Detroit. Monopoly Go, y'all. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, lift your head up and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and biggest empire. It's Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime with tons of new choice, including leaderboards to compare your priors to your buddies. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. Make your friends bankrupt by smashing the landmarks with a wrecking ball. Charge other players rent for your iconic properties. So get back out there, put in your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Another quick swig. All right, looking at tomorrow for the Panthers as they have, let's look, they have the first pick to start out the fourth round, pick 101. They now have the Jets' fifth round pick, 157. They have the Bills' sixth round pick, 200, and the Steelers' seventh round pick, 240 overall. So a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, and a seventh. Dan Morgan wanted to have a pick in every round, got a first round pick, got a second round pick, got a third round pick, and now has fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. So 4 more picks to go on Saturday afternoon, starting right at the top of the hour, high noon Eastern time there in Detroit, Michigan. And yes, Detroit is Eastern time for those who did not know that. The Panthers have not addressed tight end or corner so far this draft. And tight end have not addressed it at all this offseason. Nobody. They tried. It seems like they would have been interested in any of the Seattle Seahawks free agent wide tight ends. Noah Fant stayed in Seattle, and then Parkinson and Disley both ended up in LA, respectively, with the Chargers and Rams. So it did not work out for the Panthers to get one of those guys. And Morgan brought up last Thursday, there were guys they were interested in, and this is the same for every team in the league. They just did not end up here in Carolina. I have to imagine one of those three, if not all of those three, were a part of that list of guys that did not end up being Carolina Panthers. They have not addressed tight end at all. I'm looking at the top of the 4th round at 101, and I'm seeing 2 tight ends who I would like to see in Carolina. Ja'Tavion Sanders first out of Texas. I feel like he's still available, and I question when looking at some of the mocks, like Joe Person, who I love Joe, think he does a great job. Would love to get him back on the show at some point in time soon. Haven't had him on for a while, but Joe's great. And he mocked Sanders. I don't know if it was the last one. Theo Johnson from Penn State still available. He's someone who Panthers could go target. He did mock Ja'Tavion Sanders at some point in time. I want to say Mike K did the same thing. So Sanders still being available is somewhat surprising, but maybe it shouldn't be. The big knock on him is he's not a great blocker. That's part of the job. Part of the job is blocking. So if you're not great at doing that, your longevity, at least with the team that drafts you or signs you, it's not going to be very long. There's a reason why Hayden Hurst, who has been a solid receiving tight end, has bounced around to 4 or 5 different teams at this point in time. There's a reason why guys like CJ Uzama have bounced around the league. They're not great at blocking. And Ja'Tavion Sanders, if he doesn't come in here or wherever he goes and develop as a better blocker, he's not going to be sticking around the league he may stick around as a pass catcher, but he's not going to be sticking with the team that he plays for. You got to be able to do both. That's why Ian Thomas still is in the league. He can block, and everybody needs a blocking tight end. It's nice to have someone who can do both and have someone who can especially catch the football, but if you can block, you're going to be able to stick around because they need those kind of guys to do the dirty work on a roster. That's what Ian Thomas is here in Carolina. Tommy Tremble can do that. He's also someone who's still developing as a pass catcher. I think that with Thomas, who has experience, with Tremble, and adding in Ja'Tavion Sanders, that can work for the Panthers. Now, it may make things pretty obvious as far as what they want to do passing the ball early on in Ja'Tavion Sanders' career if they do take him. But that's a player I love from Texas. I really do. Would love to see him here. They didn't get Adonai Mitchell, who fell all the way back to the Colts and was ticked off that teams didn't take him. Their general manager, Chris Ballard, was also pissed, dropping F-bombs about, I guess, a smear campaign, so to say, that was put out there by A.D. Mitchell. I don't know. But he's not here in Carolina. They do have Jonathon Brooks, so they got a Longhorn. I would love to get another Longhorn in Ja'Tavion Sanders. Case Stover from Ohio State. Sorry, my bad. The Ohio State University. He's also available. Probably more of a complete tight end than Sanders is, as he can be someone who's great in the run game as well as far as blocking and can catch. Not the same kind of athlete, but all around probably is a better tight end and not as much of a developmental guy in terms of having to be a blocker like Sanders would be. I would love Sanders, but Cade Stover would make sense. Theo Johnson from Penn State, as I mentioned. Any of those 3 guys would make a lot of sense for the Panthers at 101. Or they could address corner. Dan Morgan was asked about this tonight. Yesterday, as it's now Saturday, April 27th, 12:03 Eastern time right now, live on YouTube. Dan, he said that they'd like to address corner sometime, whether it be in the draft or after the draft, mentioning there are some guys still out there available. I wonder who he could be talking to. Oh, Stephon Gilmore, his neighbor down there in Waxhaw, still available. And somebody I feel pretty confident right now the Panthers are going to land. They're going to bring him back. There's so many Gamecocks here right now, man. You got Jadevion's back here. You have DJ Wonnum around. You got Xavier Legette. I'm coming around on Legette. I've done more research on him, and I have a lot to say about him on Monday. We'll get there. I didn't hate the pick. There's a guy who I wanted. Maybe it was a little bit too emotional last night when breaking it down. Legette he brings joy to my soul just listening to him talk. And I do love the story. We'll get into more of what he can do over the coming days and weeks, of course, as we have plenty of time to break that down because we don't play a game until September, which sucks. I'm ready to go now after tonight, just getting really fired up about what this team, I don't know, they're not going to be good, but what this team at least can look like this year as they're going to build. And there's a beauty in the build of things like this in the NFL. But getting back to there's a lot of Gamecocks. So Stephon should feel at home. He's already at home, and he's going to have former teammates and former alumni there, fellow alumni here in Carolina. Why not So Dan Morgan doesn't seem to be pressed about that. They must feel pretty confident that they can land Stephon Gilmore. While it may not be a long-term move, it is something in the interim that would help the Panthers. And he's been healthy the last 2 seasons and played at a high level. So I like the idea of Stephon Gilmore coming back to Carolina for a second go-round, teaming up with J.C. Horn. And you got Troy Hill and you got Dane Jackson. You would like to have another young guy to play at the nickel spot. I look at TJ Tampa. He's not a nickel. He's still available. He could be an outside corner, and I could really be talked into that at 101. Maybe they get somebody else who's more of a slot later on in the draft, maybe at 157. We'll see. Another player on the board who took some visits here, and I've seen mocked to the Panthers, is Jerry Rice's son, Brendan Rice from Southern Cal. He's available. He could be on the board. He's already on the board, but he could maybe still be there at 157, and the Panthers could add yet another offensive playmaker and a potential long-term fit in this offense for Carolina. So TJ Tampa, as far as corners go, that's the guy I would like to see. Brendan Rice, receiver, could be something the Panthers decide to do. But tight end, Jatavion Sanders, Cade Stover, Theo Johnson, all 3 of those guys still on the board, a position the Panthers have not addressed so far. You got to think 101. That's where they're going to go. We'll see if that's what they do. Now, as far as 200 and 240 go, good questions from the media after the draft tonight, asking would the Panthers bring in some competition, maybe at punter or at kicker. I did have someone DM me asking about that, saying, hey, how are you ignoring special teams? Eddie Pinheiro didn't have the best year last year. Still think he's a good kicker. Didn't have the best year. Competition, that's good. Dave Canales has already said they're willing to bring in competition at every spot because it makes everybody better. We've always heard about that. Pressure makes diamonds, yada, yada, yada. Johnny Hecker's getting up there as a punter. Why not bring in someone younger potentially to do that? We'll see if they do it. If they want to take special teams player at 240, totally good. 200, just because of where the pick is, that guy's got to play special teams to make the roster. But as far as being a specialist, 240, I think that makes sense to try and get a kicker. And the mock I did earlier this week, that's what I did. Took Will Reichert out of Alabama. They don't have to take him. Harrison Mevis out of Mizzou, like him as well. So that would be something I think the Panthers should certainly look at with pick 200 or pick 240. But get a tight end, y'all. Come on. What are we doing? We waited too long for that. All right. It's late. I'm going to bed. I'll be back with y'all later on today, noon Eastern time. That's when the draft starts back up. My plan is to chill at my house and to watch the draft and to come back to a live show. That's the plan. Plans may change. Maybe I'll just wait till Sunday to give you all everything comprehensive. But there's a lot of notes I got here. I'm just looking at my notes app right now that I kind of want to get into this week, so early on. So I probably just need to get in and discuss what the Panthers are going to do with the round, with pick 101, 157, 200, 240 on Saturday or today. So we'll see how that works out. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays at the offseason, I'm here answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me, to get those questions into me for next week's edition. Now, wait till after the draft to get them in, but please get them in for next Friday. Appreciate all the folks who were here live with me tonight for this post-draft reaction show. Be back with y'all later on today. So be happy, be whole, as always, and forever keep pounding. And I'll talk to y'all later this afternoon.